Japanese Navy took Dalian in Liaodong Peninsula, Tanggu near Tianjin, and Weihai in Shandong Peninsula. In doing so, Japanese practically ruled Beihai Sea and Beihai Bay. Beihai Bay is the jugular to China because Tanggu and Tianjin was very close to Beijing. So the Beijing was threatened. Li Hongzhang didn't have any choice. He called for the negotiation and the treaty. If not, China had to surrender to Japan. Li Hongzhang from Qing went to Simonoseki in Japan and met Ito Hirobumi of Japan. They signed the treaty on April 17, 1895. It was known to be the Treaty of Shimonoseki. And Article 1 stated that Joseon was the independent country. The traditional relationship between Joseon and Qing had ended, and Japan appeared to be free to manipulate Joseon. However, the game had not been over yet. In 6 days after the treaty was signed, the Russian ambassador to Japan, accompanied by a German and the French ambassador, went to Japanese government and inquired that Japan should return the Liaodong Peninsula that she just took from Qing. Japan's military power was no match to Russians, and Japan could not imagine that they could win the war against Russia. So Japan didn't have any choice except that they have to accept what the Russians requesting. So Liaodong Peninsula was given back to Qing dynasty. On the surface, Qing got her territory back. However, the Russians got all the benefits of what happened. The whole process was called triple intervention. Russians always looked for the unfrozen ports because Russia did not have the ports that did not freeze during the winter time. So the Russians got her wish fulfilled, and the Russians got many interest in Manchuria. So Russia became a powerful force in the Northeast Asia. The clever Queen Min could not miss the opportunity. She saw what went around her. Now she thought that Russia is the one she could rely on. So she shied away from Japanese and pro-Japanese progressives, and she formed the cabinet with pro-Russian politicians. Japan went to hiding and started to mobilize the whole nation to prepare for the showdown against Russia. Queen Min, who had the blessings of Russians, decided to eliminate every one of pro-Japanese progressives. For the progressives, their lives were on the line. Hungsan was always trying to have his power back by eliminating Queen Min. For Japan, Queen Min was the worst obstacle for her encroachment to Joseon. So Queen Min had three enemies: Japan, pro-Japanese progressives, and Hungsan. Three parties conspired to kill Queen Min. On October 8, 1895, she got killed in the palace. So, pro-Japanese progressives in Japan came back to the power, but it would not last long. After the death of Queen Min, Gojong became very lonely and fearful. The palace was full of pro-Japanese progressives and the Japanese soldiers who were watching Gojong. And they are all enemies of Queen Min, likewise to Gojong. Naturally, Gojong wanted to go to some safe place and revenge pro-Japanese progressives in Japan for his wife's killing. The pro-Russian factions wanted to get back to the power, and they were looking for the opportunity. And then they conversed with the Russian ambassador to Joseon, and they took Gojong to Russian legation secretively. As soon as Gojong got there, he ordered to kill all pro-Japanese progressives, and he ruled the country for 1 year in foreign legation. During that time, the influence of Russians on Joseon was far greater than Japanese. Japan could not sit and watch the Russians swallow up Joseon. Japan started to negotiate with Russians on the subject of their interest in Joseon. In 1896, Yamagata from Japan went to St. Petersburg, where coronation ceremony for Russian Tsar Nicholas II. During the negotiation, Japan proposed that Korea should be divided in two at the 38th parallel, and the north is for Russia and the south was for Japan. But Russians refused because Russia had a stronger military. This was the first proposal about the division at 38th parallel in Korean Peninsula. Later, Stalin used this idea and he agreed to divide the Korea at 38th parallel. Later, before Japanese and Russian war, Russians proposed to Japan to divide Korea at 39 parallel, but at that time Japan was ready to fight against Russia, and she refused it. On June 9, 1896, Japan and Russia signed the agreement that was called Yamagata-Lobanov Agreement. In that agreement, both Japan and Russia will manage Korea together until Korea becomes the modern country that has its own police and military. Both countries were allowed to send the troops in Joseon. Considering the strength of both countries, Russia conceded a lot more than what Japan expected to. At the time, the Lee Hongjang was also present in the ceremony, and Russia gave Lee a huge amount of money as a bribery. In return, Lee conceded a lot of interest in Manchuria, and most of all, Russia could secure the unfrozen port in Liaodong Peninsula. Therefore, Joseon was not as important as before. It was later known to be Lee-Romanov Agreement, and it was secret for a long time. Perhaps it wasn't known to the public until like 1930s or 40s. Gojong's life in Russian embassy was pretty good in the first few months. And then all of a sudden, they started to feel coldness from Russian officials in the embassy. This was because the Russians didn't need Joseon as much as before they secured the frozen ports in Liaodong Peninsula. People didn't want their king stay in the foreign embassy, and they wanted him come back to the palace. And Joseon was on the balance between Russia and Japan. So they could be somewhat independent of the both countries' interference. Gojong could recognize people's support by reading the many appeals from the people that he should come back to the palace. On February 20th, 1897, Gojong moved to Deoksu Palace in Jeongdong, where many foreign embassies are located. Gojong thought that it was easy for him to exile to the embassies in case. In October 20th, Gojong declared Daehanjekuk, a precursor of Daehanjekuk in modern days. And he named himself as the Emperor of Daehanjekuk. Daehanjekuk meant the Empire of Daehan. It is the same level with Qing dynasty, and the Emperor of Qing dynasty was equal to the Emperor of the Daehanjekuk. Joseon officially ended the suzerain tributary relationship with Qing. However, the power struggle between Japan and Russia continued.